Claudine Moore is a global award-winning public relations leader and one of the world's top Africa-focused PR experts.
I'm Claudine Moore. The first thing I am is a woman of faith. And I think as a woman of faith, that is one of the key things that keeps me grounded in my journey yesterday, today, and certainly for tomorrow. So when Tolu, who I want to thank her for inviting me to speak to you all today, when she invited me to speak, and then she shared one of the things that Tolu said when she was when we were sort of organising this afternoon's meeting. One of the things that Tolu wrote was Claudine she's one of the first people to have an agency acquired, an Africa-focused agency acquired by a global firm. And I want to say when she said that, I was like, oh, right, I guess I am one of the first, or one of the first. And I didn't really think about that being the first or one of the first until Tolu said that. And that speaks to the fact that I very firmly keep my eyes on the prize of the work that I want to do. I don't really look left, I don't look right as to what the person to the left is doing and what the person to the right is doing. I know what it is that I want to do, and I know what it is that how I want to do it. And I think if you go through your path and you really just focus on your path, and you really focus on really paying too much attention to what people are doing around you, you won't get too far, or you won't get as far as you could. I didn't start my career imagining that I would be running my own agency. I didn't start my career. My career started in PR when I moved to America from the UK, and this is what led me into going into PR. I'm not even I didn't even go to school for PR. I didn't do any training in PR, nothing like that. I wish an organization like the one Tolu's created existed when I was coming up. It did not. My career began as a psychotherapist. I'm a qualified psychotherapist, and that speaks again to itself. When I qualified as a psychotherapist from a top school in the UK, that was when people didn't talk about therapy. People didn't talk about counselling. In fact, it was quite strange especially as a Black person, to be talking about being a therapist. At the end of the day, your therapist is your imam or your pastor, or your parents or your aunts, if you have a family that's close enough in that way. But again, at that time, I had an interest in psychotherapy. I always looked ahead, where the ball is going, not where the ball is, and I've done that my entire career, always looking where the ball is going. I never ever look at where things are right now. Always look at where the ball is headed. And where the ball is headed, consider that and align myself with it. And I knew at the time when I went into psychotherapy that at some point the world's going to need a lot of therapists, and they're going to need a lot of therapists, especially therapists that look like myself. So that's how I began my career. I moved to New York City, and I'm going to make this brief because I know we don't have much time. And I moved to New York City. When I moved to New York City, I was working I was just temping, trying to get a therapy job, a therapy role. And I remember I was working in the department of this tourist board. It was actually a British tourist board, and I was surrounded by British people. And I said, please, I didn't come to America to be surrounded by British people. So I knew I wasn't going to stay at this company. And they said, okay, we want you to be an admin assistant in the PR department. And I'm like, okay. So I began being an admin assistant in the PR department, and I absolutely loved what the PR department did at this organization. So I called up a good friend, my best friend in England. She was a journalist. Her name's Basola Evans. She's a very well-known journalist out of the UK. who herself has got an amazing story of evolution. And I said to her, you're a journalist, you must work with PR people all the time. I'd love to know more about the PR industry. And so from her perspective as a journalist, so she gave me some insight into that. I went to the head of the department that I was working in. I said, I'm the admin assistant here. I love what I'm doing. I'm working with all these magazines and publications. And I'm talking, when I say how long ago this is to age me totally. This is the days when you would get the magazine and you would cut out the article and stick it into a book. And that would be your scrapbook of clippings, and that was what we used back in the day.
No,
So I mean,
in those days it used to be physical.
yeah.
Hi, Claudine, you're muted.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So you'd get the physical magazine or publication, newspaper, you'd cut out the article and you'd stick it into a book. And that would be what you'd deliver at the end of the month with all your press clippings. And that was how we did it back then. But I loved the work I was doing because you know why I loved the work I was doing? Because it mirrored my interests. One minute I was with Essence magazine, the next minute I was with the New York Times, next minute I'm with Economist. And that just reflected quite vividly the kinds of media that I myself was consuming. So to be able to go from a consumer of media to now I'm supporting organizations working with media. I absolutely loved it. So I went to the head of the department and I said to her, I love working in your department. I think I want to go into PR. What do you recommend? She gave me some good advice. And I began looking for PR and communication roles. And my first PR and communication role was with McCann Erickson in Manhattan. And that began my career really in PR, working with PR agencies and agencies in general. That's an advertising agency, but agencies in general. So I will say and I know lots of people are joining, so good afternoon to all the people who are joining, wherever you're joining from. I do like to have a bit of a road call, so if everybody who's joining can write in the chat where they're joining from, what countries they're joining from, which organizations they're joining from, and just put that in the chat because I like to get a bit of feedback and know who I'm speaking to. And if anybody has a question as I'm going through, if it's okay with Tolu and team, and sorry, what was the name of the young lady who introduced me? I didn't catch your name.
Okay, my name is Stella.
Stella.
Yes.
Thank you, Stella, for that beautiful introduction. Lovely to meet you. So if it's okay with Stella and Tolu, hi from Uganda. If it's okay from Tolu and Stella, I definitely welcome questions as I'm going along. To keep it interactive. I don't want to just talk at you guys, but if you have a question, you can put it in the chat, or if there's a question in the chat that I don't see, Stella or Tolu, please feel free to say, Claudine, there's a question in the chat. But hi, Eunice, thank you for joining us. So I did not start my career when I started working at McCann Erickson all those years ago. I didn't start thinking that I'd be running my own agency. That was never my vision. I just always, and it certainly wasn't my vision that my agency would get acquired by a global firm. That was something I never even thought of even happening. And I'm happy to share how that happened. I simply started out wanting to be good and excellent at anything that I did. I come from a family where my parents, they always told me, whatever you do it, always be the best at what you do, no matter what it is, and to always take pride in your work and being excellent. So that really is what I've always wanted to do. I've always just wanted to be really good at anything I've ever done. And that speaks to, that speaks to whether it's that speaks to whether it's working in-house, working at an agency, being a professor, no matter what, being a moderator, no matter what I did, I just want to be good at what I do. And I still have that today. I always want to be excellent. And when I launched Seymour Media International Public Relations, which was my agency, it certainly wasn't because the timing was perfect, because the timing wasn't perfect. I launched Seymour Media International Public Relations. I had registered the business many years ago in America. It had been registered, but I registered it just so that I could do freelance work. It wasn't really that I thought, oh, I'm going to start this company. It was really registered to do freelance work underneath an umbrella, right? That was more for tax purposes than anything else. That's why I did that. However, when I launched Seymour Media, launched it properly, it really wasn't because the situation was perfect. In fact, the timing was not perfect. I launched completely almost by accident, if you like. And an accident to us is really, it's an accident for us, but really it's God's plan. So, but to me, it was an accident. And that was really because the agency that I was with Hill & Norton Strategies. I was the US regional director of Hill & Norton Strategies. And then I got laid off. I got laid off in 2009, very shocked that they asked me to lay off people who were supporting me in my department. So I laid off people in my department. The next thing you know, I had HR and my boss in my room, in my office, and they were like, basically, we're laying you off. So I was really shocked, but my CEO, who is a great leader, a gentleman called Paul Tafe, who is a big leader in the PR industry, I'm sure many of you know him, he was my boss at the time, and he said, Claudine, we have a couple of clients here that if you leave, they're going to want to go with you. So why don't you just take those clients, because they were small clients for Hill & Norton, but a big client for somebody starting out. He said, why don't you just take those clients and do your own thing? Because at that time it was a very bad time for the markets in the 2010. It was an economic downturn at that time. So I literally was like, okay, let me just try it. I may as well. So that is how I started started launching Seymour Media as a PR agency. And what you saw, people have seen me grow, is literally because I was out of a job. I was out of a job, and my boss at the time said, "There's two clients here who love your work. They're gonna if you're going, they're gonna go too. So just take them and start your own agency," which I did. And that really speaks to a few things you're going to see a theme of, and the theme there is being given opportunities, seizing opportunities, and taking opportunities even when you're not sure you're really going to be able to how you're going to be able to manage it. I have I'm looking up ahead of me because I have a quote from Gandhi that I look at every single day. And the quote I have from Gandhi, and I'm going to read it to you, and it's a very famous quote from Gandhi. If I have the belief that I can do it, I shall surely acquire the capacity to do it, even if I may not have that capacity in the beginning. So in other words, if you have the belief that you can do it, and you have faith that God has given you this opportunity for a reason, you will acquire that capacity to do it. So the timing wasn't perfect, but I started it, and I began to, and that was me generally going into PR. My first trip to sub-Saharan Africa was in 2010. I went to Ghana. I always knew, just because I was raised with Pan-African parents, so I always my parentage is Caribbean, but my parents are Pan-Africanists. So I was always brought up that, Claudine, you were born in the UK, you have Caribbean parents, but you have African heritage. So Africa is your source, therefore you're an African woman. And I have Pan-African parents. So I always grew up in the notion that as a woman who has black skin, I am an African woman. I may not have been born in an African country, but my skin dictates that I'm an African woman. And so I've known that since I was a child. I always knew I was an African child. So when I had the opportunity I had my own agency, and I also had freedom at that time to travel and do whatever I wanted to do, I decided that I was going to go to Ghana. It was really actually a holiday in 2010, but that holiday turned into a complete shift in my career. So while I always knew the global representation of Africa and Africans was skewed, I always knew that because of my Pan-Africanist background. I didn't realize how skewed it really was until I went to Ghana in 2010. And I just remember being in Ghana and just thinking to myself, wow, what they show on the news, what they show on television, what they're talking about is so, it's not even that it's biased, it is a blatant lie. We have social media now, so social media allows a lot more of the true representation of the continent to break through. But at that time, global audiences and even Africans themselves, we only got our information from news sources really, and multimedia, whether it was the movies or the news in particular. And so in that instant, when I was in Ghana, I immediately said to myself, literally like that, after being in Ghana, I said, Claudine, you're a PR person. As a PR person, you shape perceptions, you raise reputations, you tell stories, and you shape opinions. And I knew immediately that all of those skills that I own as a PR person, working with some of the biggest agencies at that time, I just left Hill and Knowlton, working with all of these big agencies and acquiring the expertise in building, in shaping perceptions, knowing how you raise reputations, understanding how you tell stories, and understanding how you shape opinions. I immediately said to myself, after that trip in Ghana in 2010, I'm shifting all of that knowledge and expertise I have and focusing it on working in African markets. And at that time, I had never been to Nigeria. I had friends that were Nigerian who were in the UK and the US, but I'd never been to Nigeria. The following year, I was invited by the Nigerian NIPR to come and be their keynote speaker at NIPR's 2011 conference. They wanted me to come and speak about about Barack Obama's political campaign and lessons that Nigeria can learn. When I went there, I met Nkechi Bilogan, who many of you know, and congratulations to her. She just won the Marketing Icon of the Year award at the Marketing Awards just last week in Nigeria. So if she's here, and if she's not, just let her know. A big congratulations to her. I met with her for the first time, so this was all 15 years ago, and she just began introducing me to people, and I just began networking, and the rest is kind of history. So when I'm about to go into what I'm going to continue sharing is going to be in 4 clear categories of what I'm going to continue sharing, because my foray into being an Africa focused agency, while the actual actionable idea for it or nugget of motivation came from my trip to Ghana, the actual launch of my work began with Nigeria. And I'm not just saying it because most people on this call are Nigerian. I'm saying it because that's the truth. It began with Nigeria, and Nigeria has a big place in my story. So the 4 categories are, the first one is purposeful navigation, really navigating in a purposeful way. The second category is making sure that you stay relevant through insight and not through noise. The third category is the power of networking and visibility. The power of networking and visibility. And the fourth category is being resilient and blocking out noise, which is probably the most powerful, really. So as I mentioned, my path was really not linear. I took a bold leap in launching my own agency. And even as I built Seymour Media, I simultaneously took in-house and consulting roles. And I didn't take in-house and consulting roles because I needed more work. It's because I wanted deeper and more strategic insight. One of the things that I know when you have your own agency, which I think can be a weakness if you're not careful, is that you lead the organization. How are you yourself continuing to learn? How are you are leading the organization, and therefore you're leading people, but how are you yourself continuing to learn? So as I've had my company, and if anybody who's followed me, my career, you'll see that I've had, I began working in African markets, as I just mentioned. Really, 2011 was the start of it. Next year is 15 years working in Africa, but working in Africa focused PR. My career in global PR is longer than that. But you'll see that in between that, I took a role in-house at Louis Vuitton. I took a role in-house at working with Tony Elumelu. And when I worked with Tony Elumelu, I was working not only for his foundation, I was also working for his foundation. I was working for Hez Holding. I was supporting the comms at UBA. And I was also responsible for his personal global brand for the time I worked with him. But during that time, I still had my business. My business, and I will share how I navigated that. I mean, it speaks to having a team. So the reason why, even though I had my own agency, where the opportunity was right, I would go in-house. Again, it's not because I needed more work. It's because I wanted more deeper strategic insight. I didn't want my learnings just to always come from me. I wanted to be in, and for me sharing my learnings, I wanted to be in environments where I too was learning from other people around me. I'm forever a student. I don't think anybody should lose any, I don't think anybody should lose. Everybody should retain being humble, and egos shouldn't be out the door. I don't believe in egos. I don't like working with people who have big egos because they don't have a propensity to learn. I'm forever the student. I'm forever learning. And I wanted to understand business from every single angle. What was it like building an agency? What was it like building a company from scratch? What was it like operating inside a big global organization? Like take a Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton, for example, I worked with Louis Vuitton in-house for 2 years. That came about because Louis Vuitton reached out to me. I would never have thought about going to work for a brand like Louis Vuitton. Not because I didn't think I was capable, because I really didn't. I mean, I know this may not be a popular opinion, but I never really had any interest in working inside a fashion organization. I mean, I like fashion, but I'm not really interested in it. So I never applied for it. However, I have experience. I used to, at one point, I worked for Ralph Lauren many years ago. And as Stella mentioned, I also have an expertise in internal communications. And my internal communications expertise is general market. It's not Africa focused. It's internal communications and employee engagement with complex global organizations. Louis Vuitton reached out to me because they saw me on LinkedIn. And they saw my profile on LinkedIn. And they saw that I worked with Ralph Lauren. They saw that I had that I had this experience in internal communications, and they reached out to me. I never went to Louis Vuitton. They came to me, and somebody said to me that, Claudine, you say that like it's a flex. It is a flex. Louis Vuitton reaching out to you is a flex. I'm sorry, I don't care what anyone says. Louis Vuitton reaching out to you is a flex. But it's a flex that didn't come out of nowhere. Where did it come from? Because my LinkedIn is very, 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 very purposeful. And I change my LinkedIn every few months. I will change my description of myself. I'll alter things. Every few months, I alter things. I alter things on my LinkedIn now because the way that we describe ourselves now in 2025 about the work that we do is not how we were describing the work that we do even a few years ago. So what you have to do in order for your LinkedIn to really speak to who you are, you have to make sure the language that you are using on your LinkedIn is reflective of the language of today. So that's why at the time I started working with Louis Vuitton. I think that was like 2018. I worked with them 2017. And internal communications was becoming more and more of a bigger thing. And I worked at Louis Vuitton. Anyway, working for a brand like Louis Vuitton, where the emphasis is on meticulous detail. The emphasis is on meticulous detail, and they are a detailed organization. There's no way you're going to sell bags for $5,000 and your attention to detail isn't next levels. So my attention to detail was learned and honed at Louis Vuitton. So if you ask anybody on my team now, if somebody gives me a presentation to review, I'm that person who is like, there's a font, that font is off, or there's an extra gap. I'm like a formatting police, because I can spot things and I can see formatting's off. But attention to detail is needed in the work that we do, because we have clients as PR people, whether you're in-house and your client is your company, or you have an agency and your clients are the brands who have paid you to support them. They are paying you to have attention to detail. And that, for me, as I mentioned, it's just one of the things I learned at Louis Vuitton, is paying attention to detail. And just this combination of starting my company from scratch, working inside global organizations, advising executives in the US, across Africa, that combination ended up being my competitive advantage. Even though when I was going through it, people didn't understand it. People actually thought it was strange. I mean, even to this day, there are people who think the way I've navigated my career is unconventional, and people saw a weakness in that lack of convention. I never saw a weakness in it, because I always saw a strength in what I'm doing, because the way I've gone about things is unique to me, and that is my sort of that is my superpower, before we even began calling things a superpower. But what I learned here is that talent will open the door, purpose will determine your walk. Every move that has been made, whether it's with my agency, in-house, scaling for acquisition, it was all tied to a bigger vision of excellence. And as I'll continue, I always wanted, for me, focusing my expertise on raising the economic and the socioeconomic and development of the continent is my purpose. And that's why after that trip to Ghana, I took my expertise and I focused on African markets. Between then and now, I still do global work that it has nothing to do with Africa. In some of the global work that I do, even to this day, has nothing to do with Africa. But that is because I'm learning from these global organizations that are operating best practices, and I'm learning from that work to how that is therefore customized to also work in my Africa work. So everything I do, nothing is wasted. One thing helps support and feed another. So the next point I'm going to go through to is staying relevant through insight, not noise. Staying relevant isn't about being everywhere. It's about being strategically present. And I'm going to pause there, and I'm really going to ask each of you to think that. Some people think I've got to be everywhere. I've got to be doing podcasts. I've got to be constantly on Instagram. I've got to be constantly on LinkedIn. No, you have to be relevant. You have to be relevant by being strategically present. And there'll be years, and there'll be weeks, months, years where you are everywhere, where you're doing lots of speaking engagements, and you're doing lots of interviews, and you're doing lots of op-eds, and people see your work everywhere. And there'll be years where you're a little bit more on the quiet side. I'm very strategic about that. I only recently allowed my Instagram to become public. My Instagram has been private for years. And it was just my team who began to tell me I've got to do more on Instagram. And even now I have a love-hate relationship with Instagram. But I'm strategically present. And I made it a habit to stay curious. I've made it a habit to read beyond PR. I've made it a habit to understand global markets, to look into technology, to look into culture, and to look into innovation. Because when you broaden the lens of what you're interested in and what you consume, and how that makes your work richer, and your perspectives become even more indispensable, and you understand that by doing that, it will invariably be woven into the work that you do. But it's really about staying strategically present across industries, and your relevance will come from insight. That's one thing. Your insight will come from curiosity. That's another thing. And your curiosity will come from intentional evolution. I can't remember the young lady who with the lovely long braids who mentioned that she's been following my career and was interested to see how I've navigated. It's really come from being curious, being strategically present and being curious, and really staying relevant through insight. And once you stay relevant through insight, it invariably takes you to a lot of different spaces beyond your PR space, beyond your even Africa focus space. It will take you beyond those spaces, and it will allow you to meet so many people from so many different sectors. And the more networking you do, and this is the third category of what I want to talk about, is the power of networking and visibility. And through your network will carry you far further than your bio or resume ever will. Networking, I remember once a mentor of mine telling me that, Claudine, you are what did he call me again? He said, you are a master networker. That's what he said, you're a master networker. And at the time, I didn't consider myself a master networker at the time, and still to this day. I like people. I find people very interesting. So I like meeting people. I think everybody's interesting, whether they look like me or not. I think everybody's interesting and has a story to tell. So in our business, and to evolve and to stay relevant, you have to network. And your network will take you further than any resume or any bio will take you. A big part of my own agency growth, and later my acquisition, was built on relationships. The people I collaborated with, learned from, supported, and stayed connected to. You've got to stay connected to people. It's easier now than ever before to stay connected to people. You can send somebody a quick WhatsApp. You can reach out to them on Instagram. You can reach out to them on LinkedIn. The way to stay in connection with people is easy. Like I mentioned before, I've known Nkechi Balogun for years. I haven't spoken to her for several months, but I saw on Instagram that she won this medal, she won this award at the weekend. I sent her a quick I sent her a quick message on WhatsApp saying, congratulations on your award. Just staying in touch with people as much as you can is I cannot stress how important that is. People like to be remembered. I remember people who stay in touch with me, and then an opportunity pops up, and then when the opportunity pops up, you're like, oh yeah, I just heard from Tolu the other day, and I've just got this opportunity. Let me see if she's interested in it. You stay first of mind with people. If you want to grow, be visible. Share your thoughts, speak your truth, give back. Me speaking to you today is me giving back, right? I'm sharing with you. Build genuine connections, not transactional ones. When people reach out to me in a transactional way, I'm immediately put off by that. Your network and my network will not open doors. It will also widen your vision. It will widen your vision. And I think that's one of the things that if you're a shy person or you don't like to talk to people, don't be a PR person. Or if you're a shy person and don't like to talk to people, stay in PR and use PR to make you break through being shy. I am naturally, I wouldn't say I'm a shy person, but I would say that I'm naturally more of an introverted person. But I knew that to be successful in life, not even in PR, in life, I knew I couldn't be antisocial, right? So I've carved out a way that there's a portion of me that is very sociable. I'm networking, I'm talking to people, but there's a good 25% of that is just me not in isolation. I have family with me, of course, but me in isolation, where I do my thinking and where I retreat into myself and I allow myself to process everything I've done in the other 75% of that networking and visibility and just noise. And that's at 25% where it's just me thinking. But you've got to network, you've got to be visible. and just understand that your network will not just open doors, it will widen your vision. When I launched Seymour Media and I was focusing on African markets, nobody was focused on Africa at the time. If you look in PR Week and you go back as far as 2011, 2012, you will see the first, or amongst the first articles written about Africa and PR was me, back in 2012, and I had to plead with PR Week to let me write articles on Africa and PR and what it means, and that pleading to include the African continent and African stories in the global PR industry continue to this day. It was just last year I was or the year before, I was one of the judges for the Global PR Week Awards. And when I was looking at all the actual entries for the Global PR Week awards, and I'm looking at entries because I'm judging them, there was nothing from Africa. So I reached out to Steve Barrett, and I said, there's nothing from Africa. And in fact, I actually went onto his LinkedIn page, and Stephen Barrett is the editor-in-chief of PR Week. I went to his LinkedIn page and I said, why isn't Africa included? People can go and see that. You have to be bold sometimes and write things on these people's LinkedIn pages for them to pay attention. So I went to his LinkedIn page and I said, why isn't Africa included? And he said, oh, we included Africa many years ago, and many years ago we didn't get much of a response. So we haven't included it now. And I said, well, you may not have got a response 10 years ago, but I assure you, if you included Africa now, you'd get a response. There's a lot of work happening across the continent. Then apparently last year they included Africa in the awards, or so that's what Stephen told me. And they said we had no interest. We didn't have one single entry from Africa. And I said, and if people who belong to the Africa Communications Week WhatsApp group, if you remember a year ago I said in the WhatsApp group, did anybody here hear about the Global PR Week Awards in an African category? And everybody told me no. So I went back to Steve Barrett and I said, I belong to a group of over 300 Africa-focused PR people. Not one of them heard about Global PR Week Awards being open to Africa. So how were you advertising that it was open to Africa? Because if I didn't know about it and nobody in that group knew about it, then how were you advertising it? Because at least one of us would know. Now, this year, it's changed. And they have opened up the Global PR Week Awards to Africa. So I advise all of you on this call to go online and see how you can enter the work that you are doing in Africa for Global PR Week Awards. And now they include Africa. So you have to, this knocking on the door, and making sure that you're included. But while you're knocking on the door and making sure that you're included in certain rooms, also creating your own room as well. Tolu's organization is an example of creating your own room, right? Tolu belongs to many other organizations. I know she does, and I'm sure she does. But she also created her own room and her own organization. I don't think it's one versus the other. I think you do both. You continue forcing your way into rooms and making sure that you stay in those rooms by being relevant, but you also create your own rooms as well, because the truth is that by creating your own rooms, you lead. By being in rooms, you influence, and you may end up leading those rooms, but it's about leading and being influencing. So when I launched Seymour Media, and that's my agency, I launched at a time when nobody was really focusing on African markets. I launched at a time when people weren't even interested in doing business in Africa. When I started traveling back and forth to Nigeria, which was the first place I began to do business, in the last 15 years, I've been to Nigeria over 45 times. I've counted in my passports, back and forth to Nigeria. I've been across the continent. I've been doing work now in Cameroon, Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Mali, South Africa. I've done business across the continent at this point. And I began doing business across Africa when nobody was interested in Africa. Nobody was interested. Everyone thought, Claudine, you've got this wonderful career in the US. Why are you even bothering coming to Africa to work here, to work across the continent? But like I said, that trip in 2010, I knew that I wanted to use my expertise to support the socioeconomic development of the continent. I maintain to this day, I said this 10 years ago and I say this to this day, I think one of the biggest issues that the continent has, beyond issues such as infrastructure and leadership, etc. One of the biggest issues that the continent has, I believe that Africa as a continent has a branding problem. It has a branding problem. It has a PR problem. And I say that because there are so many incredible things happening across the continent that are still not seen by the masses. And as PR people, we have the opportunity to change that perception. We create reputations, we change perceptions, we share stories. So as PR people, that's our responsibility as Africa-focused PR people. We now have social media. We never had that before. Social media to me is often the great equalizer in making sure that we use social media, and we use, not beyond social media, we use now digital media and influencer marketing. We've now moved away from social media. Now we have what's emerging media, right? Emerging media is digital. We're talking about whether it's podcasts, we're talking about even how we show up on ChatGPT. We have to be thinking about that. Before we were focusing on how do we show up on social media, how do we show up on Google. Now it's gone beyond that. It's gone beyond how we show up on Google. When you put Africa into ChatGPT, what comes up? Somebody can do that, and let's have an experiment. When you just put the word Africa into ChatGPT, what comes up? Somebody do it and let me know, and cut and paste and see what it shows. We have to understand now how we show up in a positive way across platforms is key, because that is what is going to that is what really affects the development of the continent. And not only that, it's what affects on a personal level the perception of who we are as well. Before, I used to tell people, you're not who you say you are, you're who Google says you are. Now you're not who Google says who you are. Now you're who AI says who you are. And that me even saying that to you, it shows you in real time me embracing and understanding evolution and how you have to evolve. Bringing all of that together, and I'm going to pause for questions. Bringing all of that together, and all those sections I covered just now, I covered purposeful navigation. I covered staying relevant through insight, not just noise, the power of networking and visibility, and being resilient. How did that come about? How did bringing all of that together, lead to me being acquired? Go ahead, sorry.
Yes, I don't know if we have questions, because start putting it on the chat so Miss Claudine can answer. Thank you.
I'm so happy to see that that's what came up on ChatGPT. The world's youngest, most creative and fastest rising continent. That's great. I do wonder, I'm going to get somebody else, because your ChatGPT also, our own personal ChatGPTs also learn us. So I'd be interested that somebody who doesn't have anything to do with Africa business, if they put Africa in ChatGPT, what it would say for them as well. But that's great. I'm really happy that's what it said with for this person. But as I begin to finalize, and before Stella mentioned that, I'm just going to go through that again. There were 4 categories, and I'm going to show you now how these 4 categories helped eventually lead to my acquisition. And me being acquired is not the end of my story. It's just another ladder on my story. There's much more to come, as you all will be seeing in the upcoming months and years. Purposeful navigation, staying relevant through noise, not through staying relevant through insight, not noise. The power of networking and visibility, and resilience and blocking out the noise. So how did I come to be acquired? In 2021, in 2020, as a lot of you may know, I actually launched a mentorship program. The mentorship program was called the Futures of Female Mentorship Program, and it's dedicated to African female tech founders. And it's the first and only PR and communications mentorship program dedicated specifically for African female founders. I started that in 2020. We have applicants from across the continent. We paused in 2025 because we've now been doing it for 5 years. And this year we've really spent time really revamping what that program looks like. But we launched that in 2020, and the partners on that program are Google and Salesforce. When I launched it in 2020, and I launched it at the height of the pandemic, when the pandemic first began, I didn't think, and I launched it in 3 weeks. The Futurist Female Mentorship Program went from an idea to being launched in 3 weeks. And to now have this mentorship program that has partners such as Salesforce and Google blows my mind. But it just goes to show you that you can start something small and unique, and where it will take you. So in 2021, I had some major surgery in 2021, and that major surgery that I had really led to me really having to be still for about 3 months. I had to really just be physically still so that my body could heal. And during that time, I got my colleague David, who's been with me as I grew my business. He took over the reins of the company for those 3 months, and I just had to really just focus on being still. During that time, I began thinking about, well, Claudine, what the last 10 years have looked like, what the successes have been, what the challenges are, and what do I want the next 10 years to look like? What do I want to carry forward from the last 10 years? What do I want more of? And what do I want less of? One of the challenges that I had with my business was scaling. As I mentioned to you, I have an incredible network that's been built from years of doing good work and years of doing of networking and years of staying relevant. So I have a great network. Often I would get, at that time, I would get opportunities that my company was simply too small to deal with. So I had to partner with other agencies to do some of the work. Truth be told, not everybody you partner with is as good as you. Truth be told, not everybody you partner with has the same ethics you have, or works in the same way that you do. So working with other consultants, other agencies, sometimes it went brilliantly and sometimes it was a disaster. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't want too many instances of things being a disaster, right? Nothing is always going to go perfect. That's just not real life. So my issue began to be, I'd get these really big remits. I'd get this multinational corporation who had known me through my work and want me to do a project, but we were just too small to do it. So I began thinking about, how do I really scale my business? How do I scale it? So, and that's just what I began to think about. I saw on LinkedIn that a colleague of mine who also had an agency, had been acquired. And he had an agency that was not an Africa-focused agency. Again, a key point here is my networking is within the Africa sector and it's outside the Africa sector. So I saw that he was acquired and I reached out to him and I said, Frank, like, you've had an agency for 25 years. Why would you want to be acquired after 25 years of having your own agency? And he told me his story, like how it was a similar story. He'd been doing it for 25 years. It was getting tougher to scale his business. And then he said he wanted to introduce me to some people. So he reached out to Alison on my behalf. Again, your network will go further than your bio resume could go. And he reached out to Alison because he knew that Alison was an international agency that had no presence in Africa. And he said to them, I've got a great associate of mine. She's had her own agency for a long time. You should call to Claudine. You should reach out to her. And they reached out to me. And the conversation began with myself and Matthew and Tom. And they wanted to see the work that I did, the work that we do. I did. If anyone on this call has an agency that they themselves would like to one day be acquired, you have to be prepared to. You'd have to be prepared to really show the work you've done, show the clients you've done, show your financials. You have to show the work that you've been doing with different organizations, the IP that you produce, and they were an agency that didn't have any, they used to work with the odd consultant across the continent, but they didn't have any Africa presence. And they said, Claudine, we'd like to acquire your agency to expand what we do into Africa. And at the time, And I'm going to pause here because so we can take questions. But at the time, I really battled with whether or not I wanted to do that, because I really thought to myself, "Wow, Claudine, you've been been your own leader for so long. Do you really want to go in house now at an agency?" And essentially go from, I'm a managing director within the agency. But the reason why this opportunity worked for me was because I run Africa for this agency. And I bubbled straight up to our CEO, Jonathan, and that bubbled straight up to the chairman, Ray. But I still lead the Africa region. So in many ways, in the way that I've set it up, nothing's really changed for me day to day, really, beyond I have way more resources to do way bigger projects. So I'm still doing the same things I've always done, but on a much bigger platform in a bigger way. And I got some criticism for having my company acquired. Some people criticized me for it. Some people told me that I'd sold out, this, that, and the other. But that's, as my Nigerian family say, that's their own. I don't business. That's their own. If they really want to, I don't really. I've never, ever, ever. I'm a middle child. So what I will tell you is I've never been bothered with what people have had to say about the way what I do. That's their own. I knew the reason that I wanted my company to be acquired, and the way that it was acquired. And so it's interesting that the acquisition was 3 years ago, and it's interesting now, but at least every few months now, I get people approaching me, asking me about the acquisition, because they're interested in doing it for themselves. I will say there are many ways of being acquired. You can have an acqui-hire, where if you're a small organization, and I am actually at the moment looking to also hire other acqui-hire agencies across the continent. So if anybody on this call has an agency, even if it's just a group of consultants working together, we are right at this moment looking to acquire agencies across the continent to expand what we do on ground. So that was really how the acquisition came about. It worked for me and continues to work for me. I'm going to look at the questions that have come through. I'm going to pause there for Stella and Tolu to guide me in some way. Or how should we jump into the questions? Or does anybody have a question beyond the questions in the chat? Does anybody have any comments? I can take questions live as well, if that's how Stella and Tolu want us to continue.
Okay, we can take the questions on the chat. We have 2 questions. We'll take that, and then we can take live anyone that wants to ask directly. So the first question is, what value does a PR/communication specialist bring to any organization? What do you think about using bad PR as a strategy? For the first question, I think these are what most organizations ask. What value does a PR/communication specialist bring to any organization? And the second question, what do you think about using bad PR as a strategy to go viral?
Let's take the second question first. Using bad PR as an opportunity to go viral. I mean, I think that is very sector specific. If you are an oil company, and you have bad press because of an oil spill, and that bad press goes viral, there's no way that that's going to be a good PR strategy. That damages your reputation in a very severe way, and it damages your reputation. Not only does it damage reputation, that has real life consequences in that your stock price goes tumbling when you get bad PR. So in that case, it's not a good strategy. Bad PR is not good at all. If you're talking about entertainment or a person leveraging bad PR to go viral. So let's just say you're in entertainment. I'm sure lots of us saw over the weekend Mr. Jollof and the other guy having a fight on the plane, and they went viral with that fight on the plane, and now they're trying to use it to get good PR and so on. And Burna Boy had bad press because he called out a singer at his concert for sleeping, and he got bad press from it. They're using it to go viral. These things, as far as I'm concerned, we live in the world, and this is a very interesting question. We live in the world where people think going viral is good, and going viral means you've made it. I'll say a couple of things. Going viral on an individual level, it can go one of two ways. It can really damage your reputation, and then you have to spend time building back your reputation, which is a very hard thing to do. And going viral, it can in some ways create opportunities for you. But what I will say, not every opportunity is necessarily a good opportunity. So you have to really think about what opportunities it brings. So for some people to use going viral as a strategy, I really think really depends on the organization. I'll take Starbucks as a brand recently. They did something that's gone viral that worked really well for them, but it wasn't bad PR. It wasn't bad PR. It was a strategy where we're like, we need a viral moment. What's going to create a viral moment? To create a viral moment, you have to have something that you can just look at and you understand in 30 seconds. You have to get the right people to start talking about things. So going viral, taking bad PR and going and making it, using bad PR for a viral moment, I think you have to be really careful with that. It doesn't work for every single industry, and it's a very risky venture, because if you're using that bad PR as a viral moment, there are instances when it can work for you, and if it works for you, great. But if it doesn't work for you, that bad PR turns into a bad viral moment. It's not everything that is viral that is even good. So
yeah, thank you, Claudine. Well, I'm trying to keep my eyes on the time, but we have quite a number of questions here that I think will be very great to also have your thoughts on. So I'll just read two of the other questions that I've seen here. So number one is, how do you stay grounded and maintain confidence in your own path? That's number one. The second one, which seems similar, when you started your agency, did you have a niche that you focused on, or were you an all-rounder? So first is, how do you stay grounded and maintain confidence in your own path? And when you started your agency, did you focus on a specific niche, or you were all around? If you can answer that in like 2 minutes or less.
Or less. Yeah, I'll do it in less than 2 minutes. How do I stay confident? Like I said at the beginning, I'm a woman of faith, and that's how I can answer that. I'm a woman of faith. So and I stay positive. So I'm a woman of faith. Is the first thing. I'm constantly staying positive. I really use rejection as redirection. I really truly believe that rejection is redirection, and nothing is ever wasted. So even if I spend a lot of time working on RFP for a client, and that RFP for that client and the client doesn't use it, the knowledge, the insights that I gained working on that RFP will be used for something else. So that's the first thing. The second part, Tolu?
Yes, when you started your agency, did you focus on a niche, or you were just an all-round agency?
My niche was Africa. African markets was my niche. That was my regional niche, was African markets when I started. So regionally I had a niche, right? African markets. But within that, I was sector agnostic. So I worked across multiple sectors. But what I did, so while I was sector agnostic, what was consistent was working on reputation, working on media, social, and now emerging media, social media, and traditional media is what I've worked on then. I'm working today. Reputation and executive leadership, raising executive leadership and branding. So it was not sector specific. Next question.
Okay. Cool stuff. Okay, so I think the last one, based on the questions we have in the chat, how do you manage a negative reputation in your career? So, the earlier question was about using a negative situation to go viral, right? That's mostly for organizations. But as a professional, so you're a senior woman in PR, you've had something bad happen, or you have a bad reputation in the industry. How do you do PR for yourself? Really? 30 seconds or less, please.
Yeah. So first of all, you have to take a step back and understand why you have why do you have a bad reputation in your industry? I mean, why? That's a pretty big thing. To have a bad reputation in your industry is a pretty big thing. One thing I will say is, not everybody's going to like you, and not everybody's going to like you or the work that you do. So if one or two people speak negatively of you, I can tell you this to everybody on this call: to be a person, especially a woman, who is confident and successful, you are going to have some people who do not like you. That's a fact. So this bad reputation, if it's one and two people who don't like you, please, I beg, again, that's their problem, right? Nothing to do with you. But if you have a bad reputation because you consistently do bad work, you have to really think about, why do I have a bad reputation? If it's for the work that I do, how can I take a step back and start doing better work? Maybe you've got to go to back to basics. If you have a bad reputation because you're not seen as collaborative, really think about, well, am I collaborative? If I'm not collaborative, how I can redress that? I think if you have a bad reputation that is pervasive, and again, not one or two people is not bad reputation. You're always going to have some people who don't like you. If you have a bad reputation, I think you need to take a step back and really think about why you have a bad reputation, like why you really have a bad reputation, and think about how you can redress that. If your reputation is bad, for example, if I could just say this, Tolu, if your reputation is bad because you're not seen as a good collaborator, then you have to go back to basics and maybe start taking some courses in teamwork, maybe take a course in emotional intelligence, and understand how you become a better team player. And somebody will give you a second chance. Somebody will give you another chance. But really, you have to go to the root of, why do I have a bad reputation, and start from there. If it's in the work that you do, then you've got to figure out, how do you start producing better work.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Do we have anybody on the call who has a question that they would like to ask? We just have 1 minute for this session so that we can close it. Claudine, you want to say something?
And in the question that anyone has to ask, is there anything that anybody wanted me to share that I didn't share? I think, and so if there's something that, even yourself, Tolu, if there's something that you think I didn't talk about that you want me to share beyond a question, then feel free to ask me that too.
Sure. So let's give the room for the participants. Do we have anybody on the call who has a question and would like to ask, or just feedback really about Claudine's presentation, 1 minute or less, so that we can really keep to time. We're really particular about that. Anyone on the call? Anybody? Okay, so perhaps you want to drop it in the chat. Final thoughts, Claudine. So when we reached out to you, like I mentioned, we were quite particular about your story, right? Because again, in my own experience as well, I've gone through several phases, like this person who is asking about maintaining confidence. And I was particularly inspired and challenged when I read the news about the acquisition back then, right? So it was really interesting. I was wondering, I mean, so you hear about that in financial circles, in business, oh, this is acquired, they bought this person over. But hearing that and seeing it first, because our profession is a service profession. And so it was a bit difficult for me to put together, how is a service business acquired? How does that conversation start? Is it that you mention to key people that, oh, I'm looking for my business to be bought, or somebody approaches you? Even though now that I'm asking that question, I do recall very early in my building my firm that somebody had reached out actually to acquire Musron Communications, which is very interesting, and I never remember that as an acquisition conversation. But how did that happen for you, even though you've mentioned it just now? But just in 30 seconds again or less, just to close out as you give your final words, Claudine.
So what's your specific, what do you want me to specifically say, Tolu?
Yeah, so how did that conversation come about? So I hear that you had a surgery. How did that? So don't mention the numbers, but how do you determine the value of the business that you've built? So then say, this is how much I want to sell it.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are many different ways of doing an acquisition. You can sell if that's what you want to sell, but if you sell, then without going into details, mine wasn't sold per se, not per se. There were numbers behind it, of course, but it wasn't sold per se. But there are many different ways of doing an acquisition. You can do a classic M&A, you could do an acqui-hire, where they're just acquiring you and your team. That's very popular in tech spaces where they're doing acqui-hire. My conversation came about because what you had was Allison Partners called Allison and Partners at the time. This is exactly it. They were called Allison and Partners. They called themselves a global agency, but they were not global. They had offices and a presence in Asia, in Europe, across the US. They had no presence across Africa, none in South America. When they acquired Seymour Media, they acquired us and they saw a value because by acquiring us, now all of a sudden, Allison worked in Africa. They acquired an agency in South America. All of a sudden, Allison was in South America. After the acquisition, what you'll now see is that Allison and Partners changed their name. They now became Allison Worldwide, and they became Allison Worldwide because they had presence now truly across the world. So if anybody on this call has an agency, is looking for an acqui-hire or is looking to be acquired, whatever format it takes, or looking to be a partner, because as I said just now, I'm looking for partners across the continent myself now to mirror what I did. You have to look at a company that wants more of a presence in your region. So if you're an agency in Uganda, for example, or Rwanda or Kenya or Nigeria, there are lots of organizations around the world, including my organization. I, as Allison, am sharing with you now on this call, we are looking actively to acqui-hire across the continent other agencies to build out what Allison's doing under myself. So that conversation, if I was to go to Tolu and I said to Tolu, we want to acquire an agency in Nigeria, I'd begin the conversation and I'd love to know, financials come into it, but also who are your clients? What clients can you and I go for together? So the conversation really begins in, if you want to be bought, like if you want to be brought, literally for someone to buy your company, you have to show the last 3 years of your financials and show the profit that you've made for the last 3 years on your own. Even if you've broken even, that's okay, because by being acquired, they understand that they will help you become even more profitable. So you don't have to show amazing figures, but you do have to show growth. And also what your reputation is as an organization, your reputation as a leader, what IP do you have, what other value add you bring beyond the PR work. So in our instance, we also brought along with us a thriving mentorship program as well. It wasn't just Seymour Media, it was a mentorship program. It was members of my team that sit in Nigeria, Uganda, South Africa, some of my team here, Kenya, etc. I know that was more than 30 seconds, but hopefully it was 2 minutes of insight.
That's fantastic, Claudine, and I think it's a powerful note really to end this session for your presentation. That part about financials many times is something that we don't recall as PR founders and business owners. We focus on delivering the service and not necessarily keeping the books together, and that's so powerful. Thank you so much, Claudine, for your time and sharing so freely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
If anybody, you're welcome. And thank you so much, Tolu, to you and to Stella. Thank you so much for the opportunity. If anybody would like to get in touch with me, my Instagram is open. So you can slide in the DMs on my Instagram or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to share with you all. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much again. Absolutely. Please reach out to Claudine, connect with her, send her a DM now. That's where the networking starts.